Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, nice to see you.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
Doing well,
Good.
doing well. Ready and raring to go.
Yes, another day.
I got my garden planted. I hope I don't have to live off it, that's all. I'm going to enjoy it while the sun is shining, and they still allow me to go work in my garden, so I'm okay there. But we still have lots of problems, and I think the thing that doesn't really keep me awake, but keeps me awake overnight is the overreaction to a very serious problem. And that is a serious problem like the crash of the stock market, which I'd like to do this, push it aside, versus the very real fact that there is a virus circulating in the country and the world, and the exact details of how it got started, how bad it is up for grabs. But if you go by the propaganda, probably of the world, especially in this country, it sounds like it's the end of the world. It's the bubonic plague, and half of our population is going to die. I don't buy into that. I think it's way over-exaggerated, and that the statistics are way out of whack. Take, for instance, one statistic I think people should think about. Yesterday's report from CDC said that there were 163,000 illnesses defined. 163,000. That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
Of that, 2,800 died. Maybe they had a positive test, but it doesn't mean they died from the coronavirus.
From the disease, yeah.
And even then, if they all did, we're down to less than, it's 1/10 of 1%. So, and of course, people saying you're belittling it, you're saying it's not serious, and this sort of thing. Anyway, I think people should think about that. Matter of fact, they should be reassured. You know, if something happened that one of us ended up with this virus, I'm going to concentrate on this. You know, I'm going to really emphasize my good health habits and deal with it, and as people should do right now. But to panic and say we're all going to die, I mean, people are really scared, you know, and I think it's manufactured. I think it gives them a chance to do two things: spend money like they've never seen before, and also taking away our civil liberties like they never have before. Yeah. Not since 9/11 have they been so aggressive, and our Attorney General is not helping things at all. But there was an article yesterday from our friends at the Mises Institute, and you know, they don't mince words. Yeah. And there's hardly anything I've ever disagreed with them since I'm on their board, and I think it's a great organization. But the title is Shutdown.
Yeah.
You know,
and the shutdown.
And the shutdown. You know, and I think there is time for that. Of course, I think it was overkill in what they did shut down. I don't think they saved any lives. They may have made lives worse by not letting people go get out in the sun and doing some of the things that didn't really get rid of the virus and probably could have made the virus spread more. But then it enhanced the authoritarians who wanted more money and more power. That is the epidemic that we need to dwell on.
Yeah, and the key to the whole thing is to convey the idea that if you catch the virus, it's a death sentence. And that's the key to keeping people so irrationally afraid of everything. Of course, it can be a serious disease. Every year, tens of thousands die of the seasonal flu. Right. It's terrible. It affects people with weak immune systems, as you say. But they've conveyed the idea that if you get it, if it spreads, it's a death sentence to everyone. And that's how they can get away with taking all these civil liberties. It causes people to act in an incredibly irrational way. I was chatting with a former intern from last summer, I think 2 summers ago, and he said he's living in the UK now, he said people are absolutely losing their minds. He went to the grocery store and he bought a candy bar. And the clerk was screaming at him, "How dare you buy this? This is not an essential product. You're risking my life and health by buying this, and it's not an essential product." You know, people have just gone absolutely nuts. But you know, Dr. Paul, today is April 1st. It is April Fool's Day. We're not going to have any jokes on this show because it's not a joke that millions of Americans today are not able to pay their rent, not able to pay their mortgages, not able to pay their bills that are coming due. The vast majority, from at least the infection to fatality rate, probably 99.9% of them could have been working in their jobs, could have been paying their rent, and they can't because of this irrational shutdown.
And the argument goes over many things that the government does. Is this just an accident, a coincidence, out of ignorance, or can it be contrived by some individuals? You know, even analyzing 9/11 invites that type of debate and argument. How do these things come about? But regardless, a lot of innocent people get sucked into this and get very frightened, and they will overreact. But I guess the complacency of saying, "Oh, they locked me up, so we're doing our patriotic
part,
duty."
yeah.
But you know, every once in a while you run into a minister that says, "You know, this is overdoing it. I mean, I have rights," and they still open up their churches. And there's been prediction that, you know, the downside of this, let's say in a couple of months this will always go by. One of the things is we will never get back to, you know, acting normally. People may not ever return to their churches, and I think some people would just assume that would happen. So whether it's social Marxism or economic Marxism, sometimes chaos is exactly what they're looking for to disturb, and they have. You know, our social conditions and moral conditions since the 1960s have certainly deteriorated, and this will further do this. And respect for the law, which I'm talking about as the Constitution, is not there. And I think of our Attorney General. Our Attorney General is no friend of liberty.
Oh, no.
I'll tell you, he is pushing for more and more powers. And this is, you know, this deals with habeas corpus since 1215. That principle has been known, you know, since the time the British, you know, instituted it. And it's been known, but we've been whittling away at it. And if you look at what Barr is asking for and sending, you know, at least legislation to the Congress, and they're talking about it. But boy, they have to have hysteria and fear, just as they do, you know, after 9/11 or World War II, that people accept lock us up, you know. But the strange things here is that people are so willing to lock themselves up in their own prison. Yeah. And like your neighbor or whatever, whoever was in the store, and that person, oh, you can't buy a candy bar.
Yeah,
it's
not essential.
I went to buy something at a store that was selling vegetables and things like this, plants, and I had a cart, and I couldn't get in the door, and I said, "What are you doing?" He says, "We're testing your hands." I said, I'm not carrying any infection, which that would annoy people. Say, well, you could be. So, but here I am just arriving in a place where they're not generally hysteric, but they wanted to test my hands. And I kept thinking, how's this going to walk in the store and pick up a tomato plant and walk out? Anyway, it's just one of those things that's overboard, and people who hear us will say, well, it's you guys. You guys don't want to pay any attention. You don't want to protect the people. Well, I'll tell you what. Protecting the people is protecting our liberties, because, quite frankly, issues like this, if we had free market medicine and a few other things and not a bureaucratic medical system, it would be handled totally differently.
Yeah, and you mentioned pastors. We put up a good piece by our friend Pastor Shane Kessler out in Louisiana. The title was great. He says, does the church belong to Caesar? You know, because the famous part in the Bible, in the story of Jesus, where render to Caesar what's Caesar and to God's what is God's. But he makes a great point in this article, and it's on the Ron Paul Institute website this morning. He said, what are you talking about? Suspending the Constitution in a time of emergency? The Constitution was drafted in a time of emergency, right?
Right.
It was an emergency. It was a revolution. And even in the midst of the greatest emergency probably in our country's history, they were still specific about saying no one can take these rights away. So you can't say they didn't foresee this happening.
Well, you know, there's an analogy to this in economics. When you have an economic crisis, you know, a war or a recession, we need more regulations on prices, wage and price control. But if there is an honest-to-goodness emergency, such as a hurricane, you want the market to find out what the price is, you know, to stimulate and incentivize people to go out and take a risk to try to send in goods and services to help these people. So it's that same way that you shouldn't be suspending our liberties when we're having trouble. We should be protecting them more. I think that's a great point. They did that at the founding. There was a bit of turmoil there. They were trying to institute, you know, some civil liberties.
Yeah, and of course, if they could adjust the prices, there would be toilet paper in the stores because the knuckleheads wouldn't be buying up 85,000 rolls of it. But you know, there is some good news, and the good news is contrary to the doom and gloom that we're hearing from the experts. And actually, there's a Lancet article, a very, very highly respected medical journal. We could put up the first page just to show it. Came out a couple of days ago, literally. And it's an analysis of what happened in mainland China, essentially. And I'm not a scientist. I'm not claiming to understand all the technical details. But the next part is an interesting chart, and it's about the infection fatality ratio. And what they found out, if we can put up that chart, is that the infection fatality ratio is very small. And it's also been reported elsewhere, typical of seasonal flu values. And if you look for the age group, the youngest age groups, 0 to 9, infection to death ratio, the lowest 0.00015%. And even at the highest level, those over 80, 3.8% to 13.3% of those infected, the ratio of those infected to those who died. So we're seeing the numbers coming out essentially like the flu, and actually even these numbers may be inflated by the way they collected them. So the predictions are highly unreliable. The early predictions were highly unreliable. Even people like Neil Ferguson, who's responsible for the virtual police state in the UK and for the hysteria that gripped the US, he had to, as we talked about before, massively wind down from his claim of 500,000 deaths in the UK. Now he says it's 2,000. But guess what, Dr. Paul? This is going to shock you. He has a history of vastly exaggerating these things. He was way over the line back in '96 on the Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, the foot and mouth disease in 2001. Vastly exaggerated. You think, well, why do they do this? Why do you think they do overly exaggerate these things?
Well, they don't have the truth on their side, and so they have to fake the truth and pretend that they're speaking the truth. But that is going to remain for a while. You know, I frequently talk about how money gets misspent when the government deals with it. You know, they tax and inflate, and you have artificial prices, and you don't have markets, and there's a malinvestment. People talk about rising CPI prices, but the malinvestment is pretty important too. And there was one article relating to that today. It said, the statement was, 1 year of U.S. nuclear weapons spending would provide 300,000 ICU beds, 35,000 ventilators, and salaries of 75,000 doctors. It shows you the comparison, the stupidity of it. So, oh, okay, that's stupid government. And we could get some progressives say, yeah, you're right, quit spending on it. And this would be better. But what you have to bring into is another factor, freedom of choice and wise choices, because maybe it would even be better than that. And if we really need ICU beds, there'd be a lot more free market choices on this. So some people dream, $35 billion, no more nuclear weapons. That's great, no more nuclear weapons. And now we're going to start building these beds. And of course, next year, when the whole crisis has passed, they'll probably have the beds come available. But anyway, the principle of malinvestment and spending money doesn't only occur after the emergency occurs, like the hurricane or a viral infection that scares people to death. It's once the government gets involved, I think our medical system has not helped under these conditions. There's no free market choices, and in the last decade or two, it's driven the doctors away from private practice, where they dealt more with patients. They become employees of the system, and they're salaried in hospitals, and therefore they have to depend on government money in order to keep the process going. So it's a bad system. It wasn't the kind of system that could handle this. Maybe this would have happened, that more money would have been spent in the right places. You know, there'd probably be competition for emergency services, you know, and people would join. You know, maybe an organization say, well, I know you don't need all this, but this is what we can do. And they could do it for a lot less money than FEMA. And a lot more efficiently than FEMA.
Well, you know, that guy Dyson, who makes those fancy vacuum cleaners, he retooled everything and started making these ventilators really quick, you know, because they saw that the market needed it. But here's the interesting thing, and it's a little bit disappointing because we have a lot of allies, of course, on the progressive left and on the right, who agree with us that everything the government says when it wants a war, when it wants to promote the empire, is a lie. It's all based on lies. Government officials and government bureaucrats constantly lie about war and things of that nature. So why is it all of a sudden when it's a government public health official, we believe that somehow they're this benevolent entity that would never exaggerate, would never lie, would never... How do they have this trust? You know, this is the same government that gave us the food pyramid, remember? Yeah. It says, eat a bunch of carbs, eat all this other stuff, you know, it'll be fine. Then everyone in America got diabetes, thanks a lot. They said, don't eat any fats, don't eat any healthy fats, you got to avoid fats, just eat carbs. And everyone, you know, gained 800 pounds. So the idea that somehow, that whatever they say is sacrosanct, it just doesn't, you know, bear repeating. But, you know, I watched the press conference yesterday from Fauci and the president's experts on this coronavirus. And it's interesting to watch what's happening because I think to a degree they're hedging their bets. I think they see things not going the way they said. They're still holding fast to this idea. If you listen to everything we say and don't question it, we'll have 100 to 200,000 deaths. And that scares everyone because it's a scary number. But then if you listen as he went on, especially Fauci, who kept grabbing the microphone. He loves that microphone. He said, well, we may be able to reduce it even further, but only if you do everything we say. Don't question it, we might. So what's going to happen if they vastly exaggerated the numbers, and then it comes in lower, they're going to say, see, we were totally right. You had to do what we said, and you did, so now the numbers are down.
I think there's a contest going on between the Pompeyo group versus the Bill Barr's group.
Yeah.
They're both fighting a similar war. One is fighting terrorism around the world and militarism and have an idea of what globalism should be all about. And Bill Barr is here at home looking for more and more power. They probably aren't, well, they could very well be allies in sharing power. And this is what they're doing. And the idea that they're trying to free up the market and help people and let other people decide it, that is beyond anything they consider. And of course, it's endless. The longer Barr's been in office, the less respect I have for him. Yeah. Pompeo gave us his warnings, and he's sticking to it, but he's a war promoter. And, you know, our oath of office is protect ourselves against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Yeah. And here we have one guy that's helping, the foreign threats, and the other one, our domestic threats. So the enemy is not Russia, it's not China, and even though they may do things in their own self-interest, that it can become very popular here, they're not going to invade us. They may want to undersell us on some products, which makes people a little bit nervous. And if a country retaliates against our sanctions, that isn't their fault. Anyway, I think the whole issue here is that it's the protection of liberty. And if we would have followed the outline given to us, we wouldn't be fussing with this. I mean, we go over these statistics on, and that, of course, is the summation we'd like to make here, is don't believe all the propaganda. And the Mises Institute's been correct on this issue, but they were very, very upfront and said, end the shutdown. And I would vote for that. It doesn't mean the shutdown wouldn't occur. It would occur by intelligent people voluntarily taking care of their families, going for walks in the sun and going to the beach and being careful. But to militarily close down, the whole country and just, well, it's going to cost a lot of money. Yeah, but we can print the money forever. I mean, they're either... Well, I don't want to say it. They're either not too smart or they have an agenda. And it may be both, but they're smart enough to propagandize. They're very smart in that regard, and how to politicize it and how to play on the emotions of all people, especially the American people right now. But we fought that tooth and nail in the early part of the century when they wanted to go to war. It was all propaganda.
Yeah.
People were opposed to war. We shouldn't be in Iraq. What are we doing? He didn't do this. And it took about a year to get people really energized that Saddam Hussein was Hitler and he was going to bomb the United States with nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
And the people went along with it. It's propaganda. People have to do a lot of sorting out. And the one thing they should listen to is ask the question, could they always be telling the truth? And when you present that to the American people, they remember a month ago or a year ago, they told us a lie.
Yeah.
So why don't you start with the idea they're not that trustworthy? You question what they say, especially when it comes to the virus. And I think the medical care would be there if we had more freedom of choices and less propaganda.
Yeah, that's true. Well, you know, we started with talking about the Mises article, and just to, I'll end with just mentioning a couple of things that they point out. You know, they make the famous Bastiat argument, instead of what. So closing down the things instead of what. And they make a very good point that a poorer America, which is coming because of this shutdown, a poorer America will be a much less healthy America, more prone to future disease and illness. And no one takes that into consideration, how many more may die if we become fundamentally poor. But here's a great point, and here's how they close their article, Dr. Paul, and I think it's worth repeating. Government cannot decide what aspects of our lives are essential or non-essential. The American people cannot simply sit at home and wait for government checks written on funds that government doesn't have. End the shutdown. That's a great point. I do want to end on a bright note, though, Dr. Paul, because I'm getting depressed here. And I saw this on antiwar.com, and I thought it was good news, that Trump may ease sanctions on Iran in this coronavirus crisis. And you know, Pompeyo said, no way, this is our chance, we're going to strangle them. But Trump, it seems like he's pushing back. So I hope the president will stand tall against Pompeyo and all his evil minions who are going to push back on this and do the right thing. It could really be the start of a new era in U.S. foreign policy. You're going to have to get rid of a few people, those who steal, cheat, and lie. But this would be a great start. I really hope that the president does this and starts opening up to Iran.
Well, when the president speaks out like this and we agree with him, we encourage him. Yeah. So we'll encourage him in this regard because I think his instincts are right so often, the influence that he gets and how these people get in those positions and demand it. Public relations in the media and all that plays a political role in it, but there's a lot more to it than that. But I want to close by saying something about, you know, what is the interpretation, you know, when people die and they say, oh, it's another death from our coronavirus. If a person dies and they have a positive test, it should be dying with coronavirus. The other is dying of coronavirus. Big difference. If you're dying of the disease, that's one thing. But I think probably most of these are dying with it, not of it. And that doesn't make it less serious, but if our interpretation is right or even leaning in that direction, knowledge of that is so important on how you treat. If they're completely wrong on the statistics and that the virus is not the greatest killer, maybe it's the system that's doing it, then we have to deal with it. And that is the reason why I place great hope in those individuals that watch our program and are still interested in what's happening and the truth of things, because that will help us. And that will help us, and that, I think, as long as we know what our goals are, and for me it's peace and prosperity, and that means that individual liberty is so key, and that is alive and well, and we see it, and the American people know it when they get a good, straightforward question. Do you believe everything the government tells you? Well, about 80% now, they don't believe it. So I think we have to play on that. So keep helping us out, get us more subscribers, bring people to our program, and spread the message. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.